through life on borrowed light. The voice you must learn to heed is the voice of the Spirit. The Spirit's voice is ever present, but it is calm. The adversary tries to smother this voice with a multitude of loud, persistent, persuasive, appealing voices. Murmuring voices that conjure up perceived injustices. Whining voices that abhor challenge and work. Seductive voices offering sensual enticements. Flattering voices that puff us up with pride. Commercial voices that tempt us to spend money for that which is of no worth, and our labor for that which cannot satisfy. In your generation, you will be barraged by multitudes of voices telling you how to live, how to gratify your passions, how to have it all. There will be all sorts of software, satellite receivers, and communication networks that will suffocate you with information. You will be bombarded with evil and wickedness like no other generation. As I contemplate this prospect, I am reminded of T.S. Eliot's words, "Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information?" I have suggested a simple solution for selecting the channel which you will attune yourselves to. Listen to and follow the voice of the Spirit. This is an ancient solution, even eternal, and may not be popular in a society that is always looking for something new. This solution requires patience in a world that demands instant gratification. This solution is quiet, peaceful, and subtle. This solution requires you to walk by faith in a world governed by sight. Learn to ponder the things of the Spirit and respond to its promptings. Filter out the static generated by Satan. As you become attuned to the Spirit, thine ears shall hear a word behind thee saying, "This is the way, walk ye in it." Hearkening to the voice of the living God will give you peace in this world and eternal life in the world to come. These are the greatest of all the gifts of God.
Morning, everyone. Not bad. That was pretty quick. I hope and trust everyone's doing well, enjoying this beautiful weather that we're having. I hear some grumbling, but every once in a while you got to remember where you live. Yeah, it is winter, for sure. But yeah, could be worse, always, for sure. But now we're doing great here and staying on top of things and enjoying the weather. I don't mind the winter so much. You know, honestly, I'll take the winter over the heat of summer. Isn't that crazy? The heat of summer drives me crazy. You're all hot, sweaty, everything you do. It's annoying. Mowing the lawn, all this stuff's irritating. The winter, you don't have to do anything. And all the bugs go to sleep and they don't come around. I like it. Well, as you noticed, we have a new fish tank that we installed up here on stage. And pretty cool. So we went back to live drums, and in doing that, if you were here the last few weeks, you realized how loud it was in here. And so I want to thank everybody Greg and Andy Bages, who came in, and Moose and all those guys got behind putting in a cage for us. And boy, they did a fantastic job. It works really, really well. So I was pretty excited about that for sure. And a little bit of fine tuning, but it was nice. I was noticing this morning that it was perfect as far as controlling the volume of the drums. We had complete control out there, so that was nice. And still a little few things we're tweaking, but we'll get there for sure. Loving it, definitely. Today, we've obviously been doing this thing on prayer and fasting, and so I've clearly been doing a series on that. And today I'm going to hit one of the last things on that, and that's kind of the other equation to prayer that we don't think about a lot of times. But the whole other half of prayer is actually listening. Just listening. We're all pretty good at talking, running our mouths and and going this way, but how often do we slow down enough to where we actually listen? Anymore, I'd say that's a discipline. It's something we have to learn to do again, something we have to spend some time. But a lot of people get frustrated because they don't feel like they're hearing from God. They don't feel like they're getting a sense of what he's saying. And one of the first challenges I'd put out there is, are you listening? Are you creating some opportunities where you can actually listen? Are you slowing down enough to let him speak? Pretty interesting. So we're going to be talking about that this morning and kind of putting it out there and giving you some, as I like to do, some practical steps in learning how to do this and in different ways that you can do this so that you can get the other half of the equation. And that's, two-way communication, listening back to God. So the first question is, my question is always, well, why, right? Why even do this stuff? Why practice it? And so that's what we're going to be looking at, is practicing, putting into your life silence and solitude, pulling away, unplugging for a little bit, and learning how to just create an environment where you can listen to what God has to say. Well, the first reason why is Jesus did it himself. He was the example that we should follow. And for sure, Matthew 4:1 tells us that then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And so when that happened, the 40 days, 40 nights when he was out there, he was led to pull away from everything else when he was praying. Matthew 4:23, after he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. And so you see this as a practice. Mark 1:35. In the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went away to a secluded place and was praying there. Luke 4:42. When day came, Jesus left and went to a secluded place, and the crowds were searching for him and came to him, and he tried to keep him from leaving, basically from going away from them. And so here's just 4 quick scriptures, and you can already see a pattern where Jesus pulled away from people, right? And you also see a pattern where he went up the mountain, he got on the boat, he went away. He got secluded, he got away from what I would say is the noise. All the noise going on. He just got away from it so he could clear his head and be able to listen and hear what his Father was putting on his heart and what was going on there. And so, why do we got to follow Jesus? Well, we don't do a lot of work on this, but the truth is, if we go to the next slide, Jesus was called a rabbi, which, as you know, is Hebrew. It's a Jewish thing. And a rabbi was a leader. He was someone who would invite people to follow him. And his disciples, even before Jesus, that was the practice. The rabbi would bring on students, invite them to work with him, And then he would teach them all the ways from when they were little, all the ways of the Torah, the Old Testament, Pentateuch, all that. And he would model it for them more than anything else. The rabbi would model it, would live it. It wasn't a do as I say, don't as I do. The rabbi would live it out in front of them. And it was more like an apprenticeship, where it's like, it's not just school books. Come, watch how this is done. And Jesus was often referred to as a rabbi. Teacher, master was a common translations of that. And Jesus often was telling these guys, watch what I do and do as I do. And so that's the idea here. We should absolutely follow his example. He calls us, invites us to follow him. You know, a unique thing about Jesus and other Jewish rabbis was most rabbis, the students were just brought to them. You know, they were the basically wealthier families, people who were doing better and could afford those kinds of arrangements where the students would go to him. And Jesus, when he was selecting his disciples, we know the story, right? He went and found disciples who weren't of that nature, who weren't the well-to-do, who weren't well off, who had everything going for them, the notable in society. He didn't pick any of those people. He picked everyday people from every walk of life. Fishermen and people who were involved with tax collecting, people who were just everyday people. And there's something there for us to glean from that, in that Jesus doesn't need you to have some degree in theology. He doesn't need you to be the higher crust of society. It's nothing like that. He's after everyday people. You are not disqualified. You are qualified. He's inviting you in. Come follow me. I want you. He's choosing us. That's pretty cool. You are literally chosen by Jesus. Next thing is reason to hear the voice of God. To hear the voice of God. 1 Kings 19, we have a prophet who was told, go out and stand on the mountain. He's needing to hear from God. And the Lord replied, I want you to see me when I pass by. All at once a strong wind shook the mountain and shattered the rocks, but the Lord was not in the wind. Next there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And finally, after all that commotion, all that stuff that would get your attention, there's a gentle breeze. And when Elijah heard it, he covered his face with his coat. He went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And the Lord asked, Elijah, why are you here? It was in the still, gentle breeze that he heard the still, small voice. See, the trick is we need to be still to hear his still, small voice. So often, we're looking for grandiose signs. We want the burning bush, right? We want all the cool stuff to happen, and we're looking for this miraculous stuff out of anywhere for God to talk to us and show us something. And I am telling you, out of my years of experience, way more often than not, it's the still small voice where I sense God's presence and I sense his direction. Now, when we say voice, unlike Judy, I don't hear voices, like actual voices. We've been working with her. She's getting there. It might be the 8 million kids she cares for, and they just echo in her head all day. But no, I don't hear an actual voice. It's more like an impression. It's more like something comes to mind, you know, like the light bulb moments, right? And something will pop, or I'll get this impression on me, like a thought will come. And that's usually more how I recognize it. It's simple, it's soft, it's quiet. And then I'll think about it and I'll pray about it. That is way more how I sense what the Lord is saying to me and what the direction is. So, you know, God bless you if you're looking for a burning bush. Let me know if you find one. That'd be really cool. But in the meantime, let's talk about ways that we can hear him more often and not have to be so crazy, right? To be physically and spiritually restored. Mark 6 tells us this, and he said to them, come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while. For there were many people coming and going, and they didn't even have time to eat. They went away in the boat to a secluded place by themselves. You catching on to a pattern here yet? This pulling away, getting away from the noise. It's really hard to hear a still small voice when you got all kinds of madness going on, all kinds of noises, all kinds of things flying at you, coming at you, distractions, even just the rhythms of everyday life, coming and going and appointments and getting people here and there and doing the stuff you got to do. It's really hard to hear a still small voice when you're in those moments. And so we see the pattern laid out in Scripture, but are we doing the practice of doing that ourselves? That's the question, right? Paul said that even nature will reveal God to us. If you just look at creation, you get the sense that there's something else out there. There's something bigger than us, right? And all kinds of things start coming to mind, like, wow, the enormity of it. You ever go out, and we moved out into the country this past year. One of the first things I noticed right away was looking at the night sky. You know why? Because there's no noise out there. What kind of noise? Light noise. There's no extra lights. I can turn off the lights and walk out back, and there's no other lights coming and disrupting it, and it's like, wow. The sky literally looks different to me at night than what I've ever noticed. It's so brilliant, and you see every little detail on a clear night. It's really quite remarkable when you experience that. And what makes that so much more alive and so much brilliant and all that? It's the lack of noise, getting rid of all the lights, the extra lights. We've done that a couple times where we shut off every light in the house, shut off everything just so we can see it, and it's amazing. Nature itself reveals God just by looking at the beauty of it, how it's organized and how it's put together, how masterful God was as a creator. And so, yeah, I love coming to church. I love worshiping together. But some of the best places I've gone to hear the voice of God is when I've gotten out. It's on Canadice Lake at 5:30 in the morning and nobody else is out there. And I get on my kayak and I paddle out and the steam's coming off the lake. Perfectly quiet. Nobody's out there. Those are easy times to get in touch and get connected with God and feel His presence. For me, another huge bonus is, moving out of town like that up on the hill is just getting out in the woods again. That's been incredible for me. I used to hunt a lot. I used to get out in the woods a lot years ago up at Anderson's, and then got so busy coaching sports and doing all these other things that I haven't been out in the woods in forever, really. Spent any kind of time out there. And it's been pretty cool, just walking down through the woods. I go out hunting. I could care less if I see something or not. It's nice, but for me, it's just about being out there. There's a couple times, even before hunting season opened, I just went out and sat in my tree stand and just took it all in, just watching it, and the quietness of it and connecting. There is something to be said. Now, y'all don't have to be tree huggers or nature lovers. You do you figure you out. But I do think there's something about getting out into nature and getting out away from all the craziness that something happens where you can just come down about 20 notches and just rest and take it in. So if walking around nature ain't your thing, I'll tell you another practical way that I like to do it. And that's riding my motorcycle. There's something about being on the bike and just tooling, just flying along. You can't have a whole lot of conversation if Julie's with me or not, but you just take in the surroundings. You're one click closer to the surroundings, and it's just, we would just take off. I'd have no plans. I just pick a direction and see how lost I could get and see how well I could find my way back. It was kind of the challenge. But in doing that, it would just clear everything. One of the biggest times I heard from God was on a 2,000-mile round trip, motorcycle trip that I took. That's a lot of miles on the road driving. After a while, you run out of thoughts. And that's literally, I got one of them brains always going, always thinking, always analyzing, always checking things out, calculating, and it just doesn't stop. Sometimes it's annoying. And but on that trip, after about, I don't know, 6-7 hours, I kind of ran out of thoughts, ran out of stuff to think about or run through scenarios. And that was when I actually started to sense God and sense him speaking to me, was on that trip. But it took a long time for me to shut up, and I'm not verbally, my brain had to stop and just ride and listen. I'm telling you, it's not always easy, right? We're inundated with input, with noise. It ain't any better. Cell phones are great. They're wonderful tools, all that stuff. But you got to admit, at the same time, they can be very distracting, right? What did we ever do when we were standing in lines before cell phones? Or sitting in the restaurant waiting for our food to come out? How did we survive those days, right? I am just as guilty. If we're in line waiting, what do we all do? Whoop, the phone comes out and we start poking around. All right, we're at the restaurant sitting, waiting for dinner to come. Whoop, phones come out, We all do it, right? But think about that, what that's doing to us, because it is programming us, like it or not. It's called conditioning, and we get conditioned. And we were talking to Taylor and Nick, and we were just talking about little Levi, and watching him, and they've decided to back way off on the input. It's just amazing. He gets on the phone. He's 2, and he's scrolling through the YouTube to find what he wants, and he knows to hit it. And if the screen goes black, he's boop, hits that button. It comes on. It's that's a problem. Wow, that young, and he's already got it figured out. But you know what? The worst part is we've noticed with the little guy. He won't watch a show more than a few minutes. It's the instant gratification loop. Bored, next, bored, next, bored, next. And we were talking about that's probably not healthy. He's developing in his brain. And I'm proud of them because they caught it and they're we got to slow that down. And so now they're scheduling times for him to watch TV and really monitoring, that access to that. And he's learning to, if he watches a show with me on my phone or something, I make him watch the whole thing now. It's no, we're going to keep watching this, buddy. So you see it, and this is just a little guy, but we're no better. As adults, right? We're doing the same thing, right? How many of you old pros can watch 3 different TV shows at once by just simply avoiding commercials? Come on, where's my thumb warriors out there? I know where you're at, right? I do it all the time. I hate commercials. So I'll be watching 3 shows just in an attempt to avoid commercials. Skip back and forth. My whole point in all this is look at our surroundings. Look at our conditioning. And then you wonder why it feels tough to hear God. You wonder why you just not sensing them or feeling them or connecting, or because we got too much noise in the way. And I'm not beating you up. I'm just as guilty. I'm just as guilty as you guys at this. But we got to do it. Number 4, that's a great opportunity to seek the will of God. And by that, I mean specific will. God's general will for your life, easy. Love God, love people, make disciples as you go. You're doing that, you can't go wrong. But there's specific things, too, that we want to know. God, I have a couple of heavy decisions coming, and I'm not quite sure what to do. I'd really like to have a sense from you, what's a better choice? I want wisdom. I want help with this. Luke 6, it was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God. Has anybody ever been able to do that? Stay up all night? I'm just curious. Have you ever made it all night, one of those? I've never done it. I fall asleep every time. I just can't do it. I've tried, and nope. But he stays up all night in prayer, and when day came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles. See, before a major decision, you see Jesus pulling back and seeking God and getting in a position to reduce the noise so he can hear. So he can get some wisdom from God and get an idea of who he's supposed to choose. I mean, I imagine picking your 12 disciples is a pretty big deal, right? You want to make sure you're doing that right. And so we see, again, a pattern that we can follow. And so I love it, right? I love getting out. Do you guys realize where you live? I'm always guilty, as you know where that is, right? I'm so guilty of this. We have one of the most stunning parks in the world out at Letchworth. How many times you go there? It's like people who live at the beach, right? You just, I don't know, I live a block away, but I haven't been to the beach in 3 years. Like, there's something, there's something about that. We got Stony Brook. You live in the Finger Lakes region. This area is gorgeous. Yes, the taxes suck, but other than that, New York really out in this area is absolutely stunning, what it has to offer. And so Julie and I started making it a practice, because we lived here. I probably went 10 years and never went to Letchworth. Just didn't go. I don't know, that's Mount Morris. I might go up there or whatever. And then ever since then, every time we go, I'm like, man, this place is amazing. It's just absolutely stunning and beautiful. And so now we go through Letchworth several times a year, whether usually on the motorcycle. And we'll stop, pick a different spot every time and just chill out, check it out. But I share that to say it's so easy to ignore something like that, the awesome opportunity we have right in front of us. It's crazy. So I think a lot of the problem is, are we accessing and creating opportunities to hear? That's what you got to start asking yourself. Number 5, learn control of the tongue or fingers. Proverbs 17. He who restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. I love this one. Even a fool, when he keeps silent, is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is considered prudent. That is some sage advice, friends. If you don't know what's going on, just be quiet. People have no idea what you don't know, right? I mean, I've done that so many times. Certain meetings, certain things, you just be quiet. Shake your head a lot. Hope they don't call on you. But in seriousness, right? Pulling away, and when you spend a little bit of that time in the silence and solitude, it does build your spirit, right? And it allows a chance for the fruit of the Spirit to grow in you. You think about things I need to work on, and you could pray about that. Lord, help me. I react so quickly to everything. Help me to slow down, keep my mouth closed, and be calmer, right? That's something you could work on, and that's the best place to do it. It's when you don't have distraction, for sure. James 1:19 says this, my dear brothers and sisters, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. James 3:2, we all make many mistakes, but those who control their tongues can also control themselves in every other way. The Bible talks about the tongue being the equivalent of a rudder on a ship. It steers the whole thing. There's something about that, right? The more we can gain control over our tongue, I think it shows up in other ways in our lives, because it takes a lot of self-control to control the tongue and the things that we say and the things that we do. It's not easy, for sure. Anybody know French? Anybody? Oh, because Canada, right? The French up there. So fermez la bouche, you know what that means, right? Basically, shut up, close your mouth. The other part may be a little trickier. And, anybody know that? Figure it out? It's probably tougher. It's fermez la bouche and only listen to God. Only listen to God. When I was growing up, my aunt or my uncle was stationed in France. And so my aunt went over there and lived in France for 2-3 years. Picked up a lot of French. And so when I was a little kid, I used to stay at my aunt's house a lot. My mom worked. It was just my mom. And she would say it to us all the time. Fermez la bouche. And then she'd say, you little merde la tête. If you know what that one means, you can ask me later. I'll fill you in. But it was said in all affection. But she used to say that. It was always so funny. But yeah, there is something about that where we need to be quiet and listen. It's not rocket science. This is one of those things where it's simple, but do we do it? But do we actually take the time and do this? That's the real challenge here, is how do we put this into our lives? Well, pragmatically speaking, there's different things you can do. Make baby steps. I'm all about that, right? How about just praying over the day schedule in the morning? If you're not a morning prayer person, pray at night before you go to bed. How about some point during the day, just take 5 minutes shut your door, walk away, go sit in your car. Don't turn the radio on. Don't look at your phone for 5 minutes. Take a deep breath and just ask God to speak to you, right? Your devotional times, there's all kinds of things you can do. You could even start to grow it, right? Maybe just pick an hour of walking away and getting away from everybody and listening. And then you might choose to do a half day, a whole day. Some people go away for 2-3 days. Whatever, that might not be possible for you. But I've learned to practice it more. I often go in our woods that we have now. I love to just go walk through the woods, no agenda. It's peaceful. Everything disappears. It gets quiet, and helps me slow down and get quiet. But you got to figure out what works for you. You got to figure out what works for you. And yes, that's a picture of a buck on my land that I've been chasing all over the place that I've not gotten a hold of yet. But that's all right. We'll meet up in the future. But yeah, it's so much fun. I love being out there, and I made him my screensaver. Just so it's me proclaiming that I will meet up again in the future with him. So, but no, that's the thing about it. When I was younger, I used to get ticked off when I went hunting, and I didn't see anything. I'd be all mad and frustrated. And as the older I got, I don't care if I don't see anything. It's nice, but I realized that's not even half the point of being out there. Right? I just like being out there and the quietness and getting out there. It's something pretty cool about it. Very, very, very helpful. And so in closing today, I'm going to play a video for you. And we'll watch it together. But so just sit, try to tune everything out. It's about 10 minutes. And then I'll come up, pray, and we'll get out of here. But just watch this video and take it in and give it some thought. That's all I ask.
I was reading about this guy named Bernie Krause who records nature sounds for film and television. And he was saying that in 1968, in order to get 1 hour of undisturbed natural sound, like no airplanes, no cars, it would take him about 15 hours of recording time. And he was saying that today, in order to get that same 1 hour of undisturbed sound, it takes him 2,000 hours of recording time. It reminds me of the story of one of the great Jewish prophets, Elijah, who's been going and going, and he's just about at the end. I mean, he's just totally stressed, just totally fried, and doesn't even know if he wants to go on. And God says, Elijah, go up on the mountain because I'm going to show up. And so Elijah goes up on the mountain. And so this wind comes on the mountain, and it like shakes the mountain violently, but God isn't in the wind. And then there's this earthquake, but God isn't in the earthquake. And then like this massive fire covers the mountain, but God isn't in the fire. And then comes the still, small voice of God. Now, there's all this discussion about what exactly this voice is, because some people think that the actual Hebrew word doesn't even refer to a sound that you could like hear with your ears, like an audible noise. And so some translators translate the phrase that God was in the sound of sheer silence. God wasn't in the wind. God wasn't in the earthquake. God wasn't in the fire. God was in the silence.
Interesting experiment, huh? By the way, I'm very proud of you guys. You did good. You're all pretty quiet. No, just kidding. But even that is like, I went back to the sound booth right away, and I was like, and Brandon knew, but I was like, when it first went blank, I was like, it's intentional. Don't try to fix anything. Just let it play out. But it's a little uncomfortable at first, you know, and it's like, whoa. So the point is, we're not used to it. And I think we need to maybe figure out a way to do it, whatever it takes, wherever you're at. For some of you, you might just have to lock yourself in the bathroom. I get it. It's the only place you can get some peace and quiet. Then do what you got to do. But let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for this church, and by that I mean the people. It's such a wonderful privilege to be able to pastor at this church. Father, I ask that you would help us all to develop the discipline to step away and create time to listen to you, to reduce the distractions and the noise, and really get to that spot where it's silent and we can hear your still small voice. Father, I thank you that you do want to communicate with us. You do want to speak to us. Lord, give us the desire and discipline to get ourselves into a place where we can hear from you more often. Bless everyone here today, Lord, and those that are watching. In your name we pray. Amen. Have a fantastic week, guys.